talking about again?
Death.
Normalizing death.
Yeah. Welcome back to Team Spirit with your hosts, Emily,
Carrie.
And Lauren.
and today we're going to be talking about normalizing death, which I think is a very important topic, especially Carrie and I being mediums. We work with people that have loved ones that have passed, but I mean, everyone has somebody that they know that has passed, and it's a pretty touchy subject, but we're here to kind of make it a little less daunting, I guess, is what you could say.
Yeah.
None of us have anything to say.
No, I think it's one of those conversations that people avoid like
Yeah.
the plague. Like that it is the last thing that people want to talk about, except it is everywhere. It is everyone is affected by it, even if it's not a person in your life, like everything deals with death. And
Yeah.
we will always come in contact with it, whether it's someone we know or just another being that's on our path. And there's a lot of people just don't talk about it.
They
They
don't know what
don't.
to say around it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like
It's awkward.
paralysis.
Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
I think people are trying to find the right words. I think they're like trying to and so they can. So it's just sorry for your loss because nobody
Mhm.
knows what to say. And I don't think really I think it's important to acknowledge somebody's loss, but I think it's more important, especially if you're close to the person that has lost a loved one, to hold space for them and to allow them to feel what they're feeling, which is one of the hardest things to feel, and that's grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just don't, I actually had a friend of mine a while ago who lost her mom in a very tragic way, said that it was really triggering for her when she posted about losing her mom and then everyone, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss. It's
Mm,
so not authentic.
yeah.
And it's amazing to me because we've all been there. Nobody
Mhm.
escapes what grief feels like. Nobody. Event if and that's not to sound like to make it sound scary, but for something that we all experience, it's incredible to me, how we can't be vulnerable with the people that are
Mhm.
having a hard time. And I think that that's really the key, is sharing your experience. And I think it's just nice to know when you're in the pits of grief that you're not alone, and that people know and understand to a degree what you're experiencing and what you're going through.
I think there's a lot of judgment too. Like, if you grieve too long, it's like, why aren't they over it? But if you don't grieve long enough, it's like, oh, they must not care because they're out doing whatever and they're not grieving. So it's like you can't win either. People have an opinion on your grief, and it's crazy
Yeah.
to me because grief is not linear.
No. And I think that's why people get so touchy about what to say, is because in some way or another, we've all experienced grief and we've experienced how different everybody else experiences it. And there's so many different types of grief, not even just how you deal with it. There's so many different types. I think we should absolutely do like a full episode on grief, like alone, because it's heavy. And I think that's definitely a way we can talk and help people not feel so alone in grief, because it's ugly and it's confusing. And there's a lot of shame, Emily, just like you said, that
Yeah.
comes in grief. And then I think that's what makes death feel so unnatural.
Mhm.
And we want to avoid the conversations and the inevitable. And it's that, I don't know. I don't even know. It's just,
No, you're saying it
it sucks.
beautifully.
It
Yeah.
sucks. And
Yeah.
that's why we don't want to deal with it. But that's life. It's
Mhm.
just, you don't get to live an experience without death being a part of it.
Yeah. And
Nope.
experiencing it for yourself. We all are going to
Oh,
experience it.
right. And it's so interesting because like I personally have seen so many different kinds of death. And I do think that with each one, I've taken something from each person and their death and their experience and my experience with it. And like I remember like when my grandfather was like dying, I was 15. I have never, and he was this like gigantic, strong man. And I saw him weep. And that was very scary to me. And I started to cry. My dad like pulled me aside. He said, listen, we'll do this later, but he needs his space. This is a space for him right now. And that was very big, like interesting to me. But then 15 years later, when my grandmother passed away, she couldn't have been more ready to go.
Right.
She was just like, hello, I'm ready. And I think she just had spent 15 years waiting to be with him again. That experience was really kind of beautiful in a way, to be welcoming and be like, oh, this is going to be so nice.
Yeah.
This time here was really nice. I enjoyed it, but also I know that this is gonna also be nice too.
Yeah, it's so true.
I
Mhm.
think we also, because we don't want people's judgment, is we put the guilt and the shame on ourselves. Like, I know when I lost my dog in January, I felt a lot of guilt for feeling so sad because, I mean, to me, he wasn't just a dog, excuse me, but to others, it's like, you're not over your dog, and I I put that on myself, that guilt that didn't need to be felt. Yeah,
I want to say, for anybody who says that there isn't grief for a dog, first of all, you can go yourself.
yeah,
So if you think that, I don't know,
seriously.
turn us off or something like
One of the
that. Or
hardest.
like think long and
Listen,
hard.
I
Like,
have had tremendous loss. Like, believe me, I have. But one of the hardest losses was my dog.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's about to be 6 months for Raleigh, and I still cry every single day.
yeah,
And I possibly will for I think that's one that I will not get over for the rest of my life. I've come to accept that that's just that grief for
Yeah.
him.
yeah,
And I feel bad for people who don't get to experience the love from an animal in that kind of way, because I think what makes it so hard when first of all, they can't speak for themselves. The whole time an animal is dying, you are essentially guessing.
yeah,
Everything's a guess. And then it feels bad that if I didn't try this first, something could have happened, or like this would have been different. If I can't even tell you how much I still do those games. And I think that's another part of death, I think, for anybody, but especially for those that can't speak for themselves. We're
yeah,
essentially just trying to read their minds and study them endlessly to do something. And they're also probably the only beings that we are ever our full authentic self around and don't get judged by.
yeah,
Mhm.
And that losing that kind of love, like, is awful. There's
horrific.
no word for it. It is just awful.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that death is just really sad. And it's because I think it's a lot of it is because they're voiceless.
yeah,
And they're so pure and innocent, and
Oh,
they don't carry the toxicity
judgment,
that a lot of
shame,
humans do.
ego.
You know what I mean? Like, they're just
Yeah.
so much, just so connected and so yummy and pure and
yeah,
And that's not even just our
amazing.
pets. Like that's even the wild animals out there. Like
Yeah.
it really is just like when I see animals like on the road,
me
um
too.
it's just like they had a life and it ended, and it's just kind of
And no one
being
gives a shit.
disrespected. Yeah.
Every
Like,
time I see a dead animal on the road, I say a little prayer
yeah.
because no one gives a
I've
I
been
do.
picking them up and moving them. There's an account. I think we've talked about her before, but
Yeah,
I'll tag it again. I can't remember her name. I think it's Amanda something. I will tag it in the show notes. And she actually really inspired me. So I used to, I realized lately, even I had a change in my thought on death. So when I used to find like a bunny in our yard or a bird in our yard or like something like that, I would always bury them. And then I would always get like distraught when something dug them up because I don't, that's life, baby. But I lately, there's been a couple, we found a baby bird in our yard a couple days ago. And I found a baby bird on my walk, and there was a squirrel in the road and a bird in the road. And I've been picking them up and actually just putting them safely in our front yard, and I'll put some flowers down for them. But life life goes on, and their life continues by other wildlife. And so I've just kind of made it safer for other wildlife to do what
Access it. Yeah.
yeah, like it's natural to them. And also they need to be fed, they need to eat, and that's how they do it. So just kind of acknowledge like that kind of makes me feel like their life, even in the end, had purpose.
Yeah.
You know, it's literally a circle of life. I stopped feeling like this protective of like their death to like barricade them from the world around them, to actually just let them be part of the cycle.
Mhm.
And that was a huge like, and I had friends who would be like, you know, something's gonna dig it up and eat it anyway. And I'd be like, that's why I'm burying it over here. And like that's really silly. It is. I was having lots of God, if someone moves into like this yard or our last yard, it's gonna
Pet
look like
cemetery.
I'm like something's wrong with me. And I
Oh
was
my gosh.
yeah.
Oh well, I love it.
Yeah,
I love
whatever.
you for it. Yeah. Yeah. But I think like just kind of, I don't know how we collectively change I mean, I think we need to acknowledge death is tragic and it is sad
For
and
sure.
there's a lot of situations where it's like how could you ever see the good at all from these different situations? I don't think it's about that. And I think it's really interesting, like kind of getting back to, you know, I've had a lot of loss myself, and there's one thing that like nobody ever asks, which is like, you know, what was your favorite thing about that person? Or what did that person like to listen to? Or what made that, like, what made them light up? And we just focus so much on the actual death
Yeah.
versus the whole life that was lived that had so many ups and so many positive moments. And it's like, you know, for me, like I was raised Catholic just like Emily was, and went to Catholic school and did all that. And you know, and this is just me, like this is my personal opinion, and I kind of want to touch on like how faith is really important, I think, in when it comes to death, regardless of what your faith is. But I'll come back to that. Oh my God, I lost my whole train of thought. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What was I talking about?
Well, you
You're
were
talking.
talking about the questions that people don't ask, and oh my God, like that actually like really
I don't.
I
I mean,
had to really hold those tears in for a second. Like that is so true. And I think we get really wrapped up in the death part, just like you were saying, that
yes, yes,
it's just the end we remember, we focus on, and that's
yes.
so, that's tragic.
Yes. And what I was getting to was like the traditional ways of, you know, honoring the dead when it comes to Catholicism and like showing the body. And like that was just to really drive home the point for me personally of, you know, open casket type setting of like we're focusing so much on the actual death versus like remembering the whole life that was lived. But whatever your religious preferences are obviously very much respected here. And that's just a personal preference, something that I struggled with growing up in that setting, something that was triggering for me. And I think that, you know, faith is really important though when it comes to processing death. And I actually remember like now she's had a bad rap since her passing, but Sylvia Brown had a really big impact on my life at a very young age. I read all of her books when I was like 18. And that's when I was like realizing that maybe organized religion was not necessarily for me. Just because it's for other people, that's fine, but it wasn't for me. And there was just something so amazing about the thought of like reincarnation, and our soul's journey doesn't end here, and that there is life after death and life after passing. That just brought me a lot of peace, and it felt better for me personally knowing that there were going to be other experiences for the soul versus just, of course we can talk about heaven, that's a whole other thing, but just for me, like knowing that there was still going to be a purpose for that soul, like that my whole soul didn't depend on this one life and the experiences that I lived in this one life. And so I think faith is important too in that topic of like, a lot of people are terrified of death, absolutely
Yeah.
terrified. And they don't even really understand truly, why that is. And that might not even make sense for them. Like they can't think of a time or a situation where that could have triggered this deep-seated fear. But there's a lot of people that are absolutely terrified of dying. And I think finding, reading different books, or it doesn't matter, like any kind of religion or any kind of spirituality, like taking all those things like a la carte to how you can feel better about the act of, dying will help, because it helped me. It helped me.
Yeah.
Not that I was ever like terrified, but it definitely, I was terrified of hell because that's what I was taught to be terrified of. And I think that's why I was so afraid to die. And I was so afraid to like make a mistake because I didn't want to go to hell. But I kind of liberated myself from that because it didn't feel right for me. And I think that has really helped, just with how I view death. And then of course, being a medium now and developing in my mediumship and really bringing through evidence of life after passing, it brings me a lot of peace. And I think that's the beauty of mediumship, is it brings the sitter a lot of peace, as far as knowing that the person that they love so much, or the animal that they love so much, didn't come to a screeching halt. Their
Right.
energy is still very much a
Right.
part of us and our experience. And I think that that's just a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think when we take the faith and the spiritual out of the construct, we take it out of the box of religion, is when we can see things in that way that you're talking about, Carrie. And I'd really like to know, like, for you guys, or from you guys, for people who are seeking a medium because they've experienced death and need guidance, support from a medium, what do you suggest? Both, I think, with questions and I guess being ready. Like, what do you think is really important to keep in mind?
I think the number one thing is to not have any expectations. Carrie agrees. Yeah, to not have expectations, because, and actually, Carrie, you were the one that brought this up at one of our development classes, but so many people want to focus on their death, or they want to focus on specific memory that they remember the loved one with, but you have to remember that this person lived a whole ass life. So what a memory that stuck out for you may not be what they come through with, because they're a whole ass person outside of their memories with you, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to say that to sound insensitive or like you didn't matter to the person. It's just that, I feel like people, they want so badly to have things go a certain way when they meet with a medium. And, a lot of times spirit has it go in another direction, and that's okay. That's what the spirit communicator wanted. So definitely not to have expectations.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say. I think that if you just go into it completely with an open heart and you're just willing to hear what comes through, that's what's going to make it the most magical, because we're not so distracted and so fixated on what hasn't come through yet. And we're actually being receptive to what is being brought through. And the things that are, maybe you may not understand them right in that moment, but will later bring you a certain amount of peace or whatever it is. You don't want to miss out on those things because you're sitting there, well, why haven't they started talking about their passing yet? A lot of spirits don't. A lot of spirits don't actually like, and for me, that's not really ever been like a focus. And when I think about myself as a sitter, even maybe it was touched on very briefly, but then there were so many other things that came through that were really important that I didn't even think about before I showed up for the reading. So just not having expectations and just being open to hearing what comes through so that way you're not distracted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you'll miss so
You'll
much.
miss stuff. And things that may not make sense right in that moment could absolutely make sense later. I was actually in a live a couple days ago, a medium I'd never been into her live before, but she caught my attention on the For You page, and I really liked the way she read. So I went in there. I just felt called to go in there. Of course, who gets picked? Me. And I guess that was a reason for that. And she brought through my aunt, and she kept saying a double name, like a CC or a DD. And she's like, she's not letting this go. And I'm like, I have no idea what she's talking about. But as a medium, I didn't think like, oh, she's wrong. I'm like, what could this be? So we go through the whole reading. She brought through tons of evidence. And then I get off the live, and I'm like, Harry, you literally call your daughter Lily. Like, that is what you call your own daughter. And even me as a medium could not figure out, like, what is this? Lily. I call her Lily. She's Leanna. I call her Lily all the time, day in and day out. Didn't care. So these things might not connect right away. And I think you're also like in the moment, like the adrenaline, and you're feeling all kinds of emotions, and there's excitement and there's sadness, and it's like you're juggling all these things. So, bring a pen and paper, write down everything. If the medium has a recording, ask for the recording so you can go back and listen to it. And it's not to make it make sense. It's because you have so much going on in that moment that you might, in fact, miss something. I mean, she was adamant. She's like, double name, double name, double name. I'm like, I don't know. Of course I knew, but I knew after the fact. I
Right.
couldn't connect the dots in that moment.
Well, because like
Um,
Emily said, you were thinking of you and your aunt, not you and your daughter. Like, so
correct.
your mind is still, even when we're open, our
Yeah.
mind is still playing this game of this is just between us. But they could be talking like they had their own life. And not even that, but now they're so external of that life they lived here, they're part of all aspects of our life. Just because she didn't meet your daughter doesn't mean she doesn't know her, because that's the beauty of the universe and our souls, and how, like, if you believe in it the way that we're talking about it, that it's not, we're not constructed to this body in this moment in time. And I think when you can kind of get outside of those moments is when death doesn't feel so scary and it doesn't feel so final. And we can get those messages and be happy with these new relationships we have because of the conversations we have. Like, that's a new relationship for you, for your aunt and your daughter, that you didn't have before, but now you know it exists.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard.
Thing.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, you.
No, I was gonna bring up something else that is kind of probably taboo, but I feel like as a society, we glorify people, like all people when they die, including those that weren't good people in their living state. It's like all of a sudden we're not allowed to talk about what they did and who they were as a person. We have to like talk about, oh, well, they're dead, so they're great. You know what I mean? Like they're a saint because they died. Like we can't talk ill of the dead. And it just doesn't feel validating for people who went through abuse or, something with that person. You know what I mean? It's
I do
very,
think there was an interesting, I noticed like when OJ died, there wasn't any glorifying. Like, I think we are getting somewhere as a society to be like, just because they pass and it's supposed to be a mourning type situation doesn't mean we have to glorify the good things we did. We can just believe it as they passed away.
Yep.
exactly.
And so hopefully after that one specifically, we can up with that, because we don't, some people are just bad people, and I don't know,
Or even
hopefully in the next round they'll be better.
even if they're not bad people, like we're still all humans, so we more than likely cause pain to someone. So say you have a parent that died, I'm just giving an example, and you love them, but you had a lot of childhood trauma. You should be able to talk about that trauma without feeling guilt because your parent is dead.
I see what you're saying. You don't have to kind of excuse the things that happened to you because they're
Right.
not here any longer. And it's like, I don't know, tarnishing their name after they're gone. Like it doesn't
Right.
have to work that way.
So much guilt associated with death. There is
Yes.
so much guilt. I don't think anybody escapes that. It
No.
is so much blame. Oh,
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of work around that specifically. But yeah, it's just like I don't know. Like I feel like I've talked about this before, but the passing of my cousin is what really like teleported me into a different realm of my life.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not trying to test the waters here, universe, but I feel like I'm a lot more at peace with death because of what I do now, but I still very much have like I think that like people have a they assume that well you're a medium so you can connect to them at any time and I'm like no
That's
no
not how
it's
yeah, that's not
not
how it
how it
works.
works and we still grieve and we go through the same pain as anybody else does. Is your perspective a little bit different? Yeah,
Sure.
I definitely think so. Or if you're just, regardless of who you are or what you do or if you have like a solid belief system, I feel like you have a more like your perception on death. I don't know. I can't find the words. Like, what am I trying to say? It's
You're more
like,
grounded with it.
yeah, I think
Well,
so.
it's nice when you have something to believe in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Like that's kind of to just feel like, okay, that's the end. That's
And
it.
then, and you know what? If that's what you believe and that is what gives you peace, then that's fine.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's what I think my point is like it doesn't, as long as your belief systems give you a sense of security and peace when it comes to passing and it makes death feel a little less frightening for you, then I think that that's a really beautiful thing, regardless of your belief. Even if you're completely atheist and believe that once you're dead, you be whatever. If that aligns with you and that is comforting to you, that's what we all need because it's hard. Death is hard. And that was really like my point is having something that brings you comfort,
Yeah.
through those losses. It can be shattering, really.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And I think like for me, like looking back I think a lot of the time, because I think one of you had brought this up, but I feel like even still to this day that I could grieve more. I feel like I shut off a lot of that and I'm working on that. Like that's something that I'm actively working on in my healing journey, but because other people needed that healing more and they needed space held for them more than I did. And like whether it was my mom when she lost her sister or her brother or her parents. I mean, I remember when my grandfather died, like I was 6 and I remember that day because of how like you said, Lauren, like it was like she was my age. So that would be like me losing a parent now. So I can't even imagine. And then when she lost her sister and like, she needed that, like that. And so I think I suppressed a lot of my feelings because I always felt that was like guilt again of like feeling like, well, you shouldn't feel that way because it's not as valid for you to grieve as it is for maybe somebody else and it's hard. And like even with the last passing of my other cousin, well, I've lost 2 cousins in the last year and a half, but with my male cousin, his wife and their little boy and holding space for her and trying to be really strong for her and for his sisters, my cousins who I'm really close to. And like, it's hard. It's a hard thing. There's no right way to do it. You know what I mean? There's just no right way to do it.
And I think that's the part that needs to be normalized
Yeah,
is
that's okay. And it's going to look so different for everyone.
right. It's gonna look different. It's gonna look ugly. It's gonna look beautiful. It's going to literally be so vast that
Yes.
you just can't hold yourself back or responsible for
No.
feeling the things you feel.
Yeah. And even if you feel nothing, I have seen people in shock from death.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
Yeah,
I've seen
sometimes it doesn't hit people for a very
mo
long time.
mothers lose their child and have no emotion because they are literally in shock.
Mhm.
It is like their brain cannot compute
Right.
that loss, that much of that horrible of a loss. That it's like their mind has just completely, we're shutting the doors, can't, and that's okay,
And
you
then
know?
there's some people that lose someone who was really terrible and they actually feel a sense of relief, but because they feel relief, they feel guilt. And, I feel like that should be talked about too. If you feel a sense of relief, you feel a sense of relief. You can't help how you feel, and that's okay.
And that can
Mhm.
even be for people who are really sick.
Yeah, that too.
Feel like there was a sense of relief when my grandmother passed because she had been so sick. She had to go into like a nursing home and she was miserable,
Yeah,
absolutely miserable. And we all felt horrible that she had to be there, but it was the safest place for her to go. Like, and it was almost like she was like, well, if you're gonna put me here, I'm just gonna die then. And it was first of all, like I said, she was so ready that it
yeah.
was like in a way relieving that she got what she wanted and what she was ready for. And it's weird to feel relief that someone isn't here anymore. Like that is a weird feeling to have
Mhm.
when it's someone that you love and you miss very much. Like it's not like just because I was relieved in that sense of it that for months after when I would go to call her that sad grief didn't cut. Like they can exist at the same time in the same space for someone.
Right.
Like it's the changing of emotions and things that you have, they can be like linear and interchange. Like it doesn't have to be like, okay, well, you know what I kind of hate is the steps of grief. Like how we have really, really gone with, okay, well, first you're sad and then you're
Yeah.
mad
Here's
and
your
then
emotions, and here's
yeah,
how the order in which you are going to feel them.
yeah, because that's not it. There's a lot of days that I am just outwardly like devastated for that I lost my dog. Then there's days that I am furious. I am so angry. And I go back and forth, and it doesn't mean that I'm going back a step or like that's just part of grief.
Yep.
It's not a black and white thing.
No.
And death and life isn't either. All three of these things, a lot of things, it's not black and white. And when we put it in these ideas is I think where we just really trip ourselves up and we end up not knowing what to say. And we have the, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I know it doesn't feel good to say either. It doesn't feel good not
But
to
how
have
about
anything
like,
to say.
and especially like the person's like really close to that person, like let's acknowledge that this sucks, like that
Yeah.
this is so and like I think some people just want to feel seen that this is horrible. And like let's acknowledge that, like how horrible it is. Yeah, like as the human that has lost somebody. I just don't know where we've lost touch with that.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know either. And I wish I did. And I think that's the importance of this conversation is to let it be
Mhm.
just let it be. It's part of it.
Yeah. And I mean like I know like with the experiences that I've had too that there have been things of that were said of like, I don't, not me, but other people of like they've had a really difficult loss and then it's like I don't know my point. Like I don't want to exist here anymore without that person. And then they openly say these things and like me, I feel like I totally can to the best of my ability understand and empathize with. I feel like that's so normal, especially when you lose
Yeah.
a partner, somebody
Oh
that
my
you
God,
share
yeah.
your whole life with and that you've been with for years and years and years, you've built your whole life together. And then to feel like literally you're cut in half and a part of you is just absolutely gone and it's missing. And to feel like, no, you're not suicidal. That's not what that means. But to have that feeling of like being incomplete
Mhm.
and yearning to be with that person because they're not here anymore. That's so fucking normal.
Mhm.
And that there have been people that, you know, have been like, oh, should we be worried? And I'm just like, am I the only one here that is like not at all worried and feels like that is literally how I would feel?
Right. Like if you actually put yourself in their space, of
Like, I think that
course.
that's the point is like, can we all just like put on somebody else's shoes for a second and try to feel what this person's feeling and not judge the things that they're saying, you know, because I think that that's the thing. What if this were you, how would you feel and what would you want to be said to you? I think that's
Yeah.
how we need to operate.
And you can say, like, one of the things you can say is, I am always here for you. This is horrible, and I'm always here. And take your time. However you need. It's very interesting how people also put their way of grieving onto other people. And they see it kind of as a way of like, I think it obviously comes from the best of intentions to kind of be like, oh, well, here's what I do. But like I don't know. I have people grieve different, and it kind of makes you feel judged in a way of being like, well, but when I do that, I don't feel good. So something's wrong. Something's different. Like you can have that space and acknowledge that people are hurting and just simply say, I can't imagine what you're going through, and I am here for you.
Mhm. Yeah. Hard, tough waters to navigate. Really is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I do know one thing. I do know that there's people that have passed that I feel closer to now in death than I did in life.
for sure.
Me too.
And I think that like, you know, if you're struggling with grief, and I think that's like, oh, what are we need to, we're looking for signs, we're looking for feelings. And I think the most important thing is to really like be with yourself in through that grief. And you'll know when you're ready to start feeling them and sensing them and knowing that they're around you and looking for those signs. And you just have to like give your human some time to catch up with everything. It's like it just takes time and it never goes away. You can't cure yourself from it. But
Mhm.
I feel like I saw this thing that it's been a while, but I'm hopefully I don't butcher it, but it was like if like this is grief, okay, it's like state like the size of a golf ball, and then like this is your world, and that's kind of like all the space we have when somebody first passes. It just feels like it's literally engulfing you, and then as time passes, your world it gets bigger. You have new experiences. You know, there's you get older, time, experiences. It creates a bigger so the golf ball never goes away, and it's not that that ever gets smaller. The grief doesn't get smaller, but your experiences get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that brought me a lot of peace, you know,
Mhm.
like thinking of it like that, that no time is not going to heal all wounds, but by you continuing to live your life and honoring your loved ones in the ways that feel the best for you is going to help you on your journey to allow these new experiences to come in.
Hmm.
So, and that will help. But it's a journey. It's not something that can happen overnight.
Right. Yeah.
I
So
honestly, I can't wait to talk about grief after this because I think that is
this
also,
episode should be death/intro to grief.
yeah,
And,
right.
Well, I don't know. Can I pull a card?
yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I'm going to use this deck. I haven't used this deck in a while, and we're going to read it. So
Which
this is
one?
the Oracle of the Seven Energies. All right. Roots of Abundance. That's what it looks like.
That's
Gorgeous.
pretty.
This is for the collective today. The card signals you to pay attention to how you are anchored in the story of your life. Trust that you will be taken care of. The world is full of limitless potential and will nourish you according to your beliefs, regardless of temporary outer conditions. You are not the victim of life. Life happens for you, not to you, even if you sometimes slip into that way of thinking. If you are grounded and internally steadfast, nothing can uproot you, and you have the ability to manifest your intentions with ease. The message here is simple. Your life is safe and secure, and your intentions are coming to fruition. All your hopes and dreams are firmly grounded and taking root so that you can reach the stars in your life and expand your dreams further than you can imagine. Everything in the material world is a reflection of your interior world. You are unstoppable and unshakable because you believe that you are abundant. Know that you can easily move from merely surviving to thriving when you pay attention to staying grounded. If you find yourself in an ungrounded way of thinking, now is the time for radical trust. Growth never follows a straight line. You will manifest what you need when you need it. A tall, healthy tree doesn't need to hold on to the ground for dear life. It knows it will not fly away with the wind because its roots are planted deep in the earth. Very nice.
Love that.
That grounding and belief that we need,
Yep.
Yep.
because life doesn't happen to us. That was perfect.
That was perfect.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, we have our code with Bite Tag. You can get 15% off your purchase with the code Team Spirit Pod. You know, if you're going through grief or any sort of feelings from death, we just want to make sure you know that we're holding space for you. And if you need somewhere to chat, we all three of us have DMs. Find us on Instagram. TikTok is Team Spirit Pod. Carrie and Emily can be found on both Instagram and TikTok and go live on TikTok. So if you're looking for a medium, both of them are available. Carrie is at Clarity by Cam, CAM, and Emily is at Enchanted Mystic by MK. So we love you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.